Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds. In today's video topic, we're going over Fizz Aftershock Leviathan Carver Earthquake Druid. Before we get into the video, I would suggest liking and commenting on the video if you enjoy the content, as that's the best way to tell YouTube I am doing a good job. The original concept was actually made by a community member by the name of Oeller, and his video, Aftershock, will be in the description below. I made this build in response to my failure of making Leviathan Carver work for Warpath, the last build I made, as the unique item has a few weaknesses that are hard to get around, and I wanted to overcome them. First weakness is the very low attack rate. If you don't know, the Leviathan Carver has an attack rate of 0.76. What does that mean? Well, at one attack rate, it means you attack once per second, and every percentage of attack speed is used at a 1-to-1 ratio. Less than one attack rate means it's slower, and higher than one means it's faster at base. So 0.76 attack rate is effectively every 4% of attack speed only acts like 3% of attack speed, and so on and so forth. This doesn't seem like much, but it stacks up much later as you stack attack speed as its reduced source. The second issue is the weapon has no base crit, so that limits our options of what attack we can use heavily. Thankfully, Earthquake Aftershocks fix both of these issues. Aftershocks are a secondary attack from Earthquake. It's a melee attack, and we convert it to damage over time source for our purposes. So there's a node that gives you 100% more damage and 100% increased duration for your Aftershocks, which is a lot of damage and makes up for the fact we're not critical hitting. Aftershocks are also special. EQ can make 2 to 4 Aftershocks at base after being used, but you can only hit one enemy per Aftershock. This means if you're playing an endgame Aftershock build, your single target is effectively 1/4 of your entire DPS, or even more later on. We fixed this thankfully with Divining Totem, as it allows all of our Aftershocks to appear nearby totems instead. So we just simply place some Thorn totems under a boss and smack our EQ a few times, and bam, they die in a few seconds, as it has an ridiculous amount of damage when all focus on one target. Now, how we deviate from this concept from Oeller is instead of aspect of the shark stacking for all of our single target, which was nerfed heavily this patch, we instead utilize the Leviathan Carver. All of the stats on this weapon are relevant to the Aftershocks. The attack rate means nothing as there are secondary attacks from EQ and don't really benefit from attacking faster. And since they're dot, they don't benefit from crit, meaning we don't have to build crit. So what does this leave us? A weapon with 210 melee flat physical, which is a lot. Most weapons could usually get up to 150, 190 for a two-hander. 280% increased melee physical damage. Yes, this does work with our Aftershocks dot. And 12% physical penetration on top of the 25% physical penetration from atrophies. This gives us a lot of single target damage and makes our clear buttery smooth. Now, all of this normally wouldn't work. Aftershocks and totems take time to set up, and usually most builds we don't have time because we'll die. That's why we go Druid. Druid is by far one of the tankiest builds in the game, and face tanking potential is absolutely insane. I actually ended up reducing my toughness throughout making this character just to get some extra damage and movement speed because I felt like as though I didn't need to be this tanky. With all this said, let's get in game, shall we? Here we are in game with the build here. We're going to go over skills. So first off, Earthquake. First mistake I'll point out is this is not supposed to be 3 points. This is supposed to be 3 points, and this is supposed to be 2 points. So remember that. That'll be in the planner, as I'll fix that in the planner. Just a little too annoying to fix now. But we'll take 3 points into Crushing Wake, so our Aftershocks deal 60% more damage. 2 points into Tremors. The original guide Oeller made, he had 3 points in this, but I made some changes as I'll explain later. I put 2 points into Amplitude as well. It's same thing with the original guide, only having 3 points in this. 1 point into Upheaval, which turns all of our Aftershocks into damage over time, and they last 3 seconds. So they'll do their normal hit damage every 1 second for 3 seconds. Then we get the 100% increased duration, so they last for 6 seconds. This allows you to stack a lot of them on a single target and do boatloads of damage. You also get 100% more aftershock damage as well. Then, of course, we take 2 points travel with the lethargy, 2 points travel with the outbreak. We put 2 points into Shatterquake. So the original concept of the build was utilizing a Thorn Totem setup with Grove Mind and proccing it from chance on hit to summon Thorn Totem. Now, that usually works. Now I can show you what it would look like. It would kind of look like this. It'd be like in a pentagon, and your aftershocks would appear near them, and your area would be big enough so that they'd overlap on a single target. But I've opted for a self-cast version of it so that I can take points out of Tremors and Amplitude, so I can get another multiplicative of 60% more damage against chilled or frozen enemies, which is taken care of by our Ice Thorn Totems. That is the main difference between mine and Oeller's build. Of course, I'm a Druid and I'm using Leviathan Carver as well. Those are the main differences. And of course, we take 2 points into Magnitude, makes it so we have maximum possible earthquakes. So we go from having have 4 to 6 every single time we cast Earthquake, which is really cool. Then 1 point into Divining Totem, so aftershocks appear around your totems instead if they're nearby. So if I place this totem here and I Earthquake, the aftershock will show up there, and it will keep applying the aftershock. Now, from what I've seen so far, now please tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like as though the aftershock itself will only needs to hit the target, and it will keep applying its damage over time. So for instance, if I were to place the totem down and I were to use my aftershock, it would create the aftershock, right? And what would happen is even if the totem dies or if the aftershock is gone, it's kind of like applying a bleed sort of way. It's kind of like applying an ailment, which is really good because it gives us a lot of burst damage, as sometimes your totems die, which is an issue, right? But obviously my totems can all be gone and it doesn't matter. It'll keep ticking for the damage, right? Which is really strong. That's one really cool thing about Divining Totem. Now, the reason why I'm actually doing this is self-casting the Thorn Totems is so that I noticed in the video and when I was playing with his setup that when I would attack, my Thorn Totems would summon and all of my aftershocks would stand near the totems, even though it could target enemies nearby, because it will automatically choose the totems before it will choose enemies. Now, I wanted the best of both worlds, as if you don't know, aftershocks have really good AI in terms of finding enemies, and like I said, you only have to hit the enemy once to apply the debuff for the 6 seconds. So if you hit them, they're pretty much dead in most cases in terms of like trash, right? And for single target, like I said, you can always just self-cast your totems. So when you're just running around killing things, you just want to Earthquake, and your aftershocks, 4 to 6 of them, by the way, they will all hunt enemies and kill them, right? And apply their dot. Now, for single target, like I said, we'd set up the totem setup and then spam our EQ, as that will give us a bunch of single target damage, right? So that's the main difference. Plus the more damage from Shatterquake, because now the issue is if you're running the other version where you have Grove Mind and you're summoning the totems to a different mean, you actually require all 3 points into Amplitude so that you could actually hit the target, right? Because it'll kind of like show up in like a pentagram or like a pentagon. And the issue is if you don't have those 3 points in area, not all of your aftershocks will overlap. So that's actually one of the benefits of running the self-cast totems, is since I get to choose where the totems are, I can overlap them on each other. And as you can see, the aftershocks will always hit the target, meaning that we can grab 2 points into Shatterquake, giving us 60% more damage, which is more multiplicative damage than grabbing 1 point in Tremors, because all this does is guarantee us to 5 out of 6 Tremors instead of 4 out of 6 Tremors. While this just gives us 60% more damage, which is, in theory, more damage, right? And since we're getting the chill from the totems, we always have it up on single target. That's pretty much it for that. Frenzy Totem, This is your stereotypical Frenzy Totem setup. The only difference is we're not grabbing Dig Deep, and we're just grabbing Reinforced Totem and the tether range. The reason why I like the tether range is because when I'm clearing packs, I would like to throw down my Frenzy Totem, attack twice, and my Aftershocks will deal with the whole screen. Usually because Frenzy Totem gives us a lot of damage, as you can tell. So it's nice to have it down. And having this tether range means when I'm doing something like a beacon or like or a forge, I can just run around and not lose my tether, because nothing else on this tree helps us at all, because we don't need the crit, we don't need like anything else. The frenzy effect is nice as it gives us more frenzy, meaning we can attack faster, but other than that, there's not really much else that helps us. So you want as much health and duration, and we get a little bit of area, so Frenzy Totem affects all of us. And then, of course, the 100% increased damage here, and then the 25 melee physical. This is pretty self-explanatory. Now, Tempest Strike. It took me, I think, an hour of theory crafting, but I think I finally found the perfect Tempest Strike tree for every single druid and slash shaman. Like any build that requires a lot of mana and uses Tempest Strike, this is the absolute perfect setup after they nerf this node. So what does that mean? So before, you could just grab Mute Earth, which would make it so you cannot proc Earth Spikes. Mute Wind, Dead Wind, which would make it so you cannot proc Northern Winds. And then, of course, Grounded, so you can't proc Lightning Bolts. Normally, that would work and make it so that you would always miss, because when you use Tempest Strike and it does not proc any of these, you regain mana instead. So, for instance, I can show you, whenever I use Tempest Strike, I gain a buttload of mana. Now, obviously, you want this over what Tempest Strike normally does, because if you didn't know, Tempest Strike is kind of like butthole. It's terrible. But for a mana generator, it's actually pretty respectable when it works. Now, since they nerfed the old version where it made it so this effect has no effect if you have Northern Winds and Earth Spikes disabled, why that's important is because now you can only proc like Earth Spikes with this setup, and that will mess up your mana. Right? Just trust me on that. It'll mess up your mana. You'll have I think like a 30% chance to cast Earth Spikes or something like that with this setup, which is kind of sad, but it's like whatever. But I found a new setup. So they did not nerf Absolute Zero. So what we're doing is we're grabbing this node, so it makes it so we cannot proc Northern Winds. So we start out at a 20% chance, right, for Earth Spikes and Lightning Bolt, because we don't care about Northern Winds. Now, we grab 5% from static because it's required to grab everything else. It's either static or Reinforced Stone. Like we have no way of getting out of this node specifically, because this node doesn't matter because it's Northern Wind's chance, and since we're negating it, it doesn't matter. Then we can grab one node and Storm Lord Travel, and then grab one node into Charged Stone Travel. So we can grab Dead Wind, which gives our Lightning Bolt and Earth Spikes 8% chance, but makes it so we cannot proc Northern Winds. Now, the way this works is we get 25% chance with Lightning Bolt, right? And we're at 20% chance with Earth Spikes, because that's 20% chance base. Then this brings it up to a 33% chance to cast Lightning Bolt, and then an 28% chance to cast Earth Spikes. Why this is important is we take 1 point travel into Chilling Blows, 2 points into Winter's Chill, then 5 points into Absolute Zero, which negates 25% chance for Earth Spikes. So we go to a 3% chance to proc Earth Spikes. And then we go to I think it's an 8% chance to cast Lightning Bolt, which is a very low chance, mind you, about 10. So about 1 in 10 of your Tempest Strikes will fail, which I can show you, actually. It's very, very strong. So it makes it very, very consistent. Don't be surprised if this gets nerfed. Then it's your stereotypical Thorn Totem setup. We just don't grab Grove Mind. I grab the summoning speed here so I can summon them faster, as you want to summon them faster when you're trying to kill Orbis and stuff like that. Then you obviously want Ice Thorn Totem so that they get the chill chance from this, which is 60% chill chance, making sure that they're chilling so that we get the more damage from Shatterquake. And then you have your stereotypical Tornado setup for the movement speed and the attack and cast speed, as that helps us Earthquake more. As like I said, the 0.76 attack rate still sucks for Earthquake, Like we're at negative 24% attack speed. But once we have all of our buffs up and Frenzy Totem up, we get up to like 22%, which is nowhere near as bad, right? Now, with all this combined, we definitely want all that movement speed from Tornado as well, so that we actually move fast, because we don't have a movement skill, because Primalist has the worst movement skill in the entire game, so we're not using it. And that's pretty much it for the skills. Now we can go into the passives here. So passives, I take 6 points into Gift of the Wilderness for HP, because we want as much HP as possible. 1 point travel into Primal Medicine, 5 points into Ancient Call for HP, 5 points in 100's Resolution for HP, as we want as much HP as possible, like I said. 3 points travel into Primal Strength for the Strength will give us like 12% increased damage. And we're going to be taking 5 points into Berserker. I just hit 91, so we're about to grab all these nodes in Berserker, which will make us really tanky in the end, which I'll show you why in a second. Then for Shaman, we just take 8 points in Silent Protector, because we want as much mana regen as possible. So whenever we have an active totem, whenever I place this down, we get a little bit more mana regen. We want as much mana regen as possible, as Earthquake consumes a lot of mana. I found the 24-25 spot to be convenient, because it makes it so every 2 seconds we can cast an Earthquake, which is pretty much worth it most of the time. Then, of course, 8 points into Tempest form. This makes it so we get our mana gain all the way up to 28 mana gained when we use Tempest Strike, thanks to the little trick we do. The chill chance on hit makes it so that we don't have to have Thorn totems up to chill. Then, of course, the 80 flat health is really strong, as we're a druid and we scale health significantly. Then for Beastmaster, this is your stereotypical setup, except we're taking 8 points into Earthsign Strength, 4 points into Boarheart, 5 points into Porcine Constitution. This is just your general stereotypical DR setup. We grab 2 points into Primal Strength, as Earthquake is a big AoE, so you'll hit more enemies, so you don't need 3 points in it. I would just put 3 points anyways, because why not? Then 1 point into Savagery Travel, then 1 point into Ambush. They buffed / nerfed aspect of the Shark, so they upped it to 75% melee damage, which works for us because our Aftershocks are a melee attack, and then kept the melee attack to be the same, but then they nerfed Feeding Frenzy, so you can only stack it up 10 times. So it's nerfed for Beastmasters, but for a build like ours, where we just want the increased damage, it actually works pretty well. So just having that 75% increase is really strong, especially considering that we can only get up to like 800% at our top end. So just having that extra 75% in that increased attack speed feels amazing. Then for Druid, we want as much HP as possible. 6 points into Blood Claws for the physical penetration, and the physical damage leeches health. This will apply from our Aftershocks, which was damage over time, but will heal us back. 5 points into Bark Skin for the 10% endurance, so we can cap out our endurance later on. 8 points into Vitality. This actually helps us cap our poison resistance, because that's actually important now, and the Vitality just gives us a bunch of health. 1 point travel into Spirit Claws, because this is a very small amount of melee physical damage, because if you look at our actual sword, we're getting to like 210 melee physical, so this is a very small amount, so it's not worth putting more points into. Then 10 points into Blossoming Vines for another 100 flat health, which is really strong. And of course, Hide Skin. So pretty much this is the main reason why Druids are so tanky. It makes it so normally your HP bar, you have 20% of your HP as endurance threshold, but thanks to Druid, you get 30% of your HP as endurance threshold. And obviously your endurance should be much higher than I have right now. I just haven't farmed the blessing from Spirits of Fire. This should actually be endurance, 27% increased endurance, but I haven't gotten the time to actually grind for that blessing, but that's what you should have. So you cap out your endurance. You can just run it on rares until you get there. That's pretty much it for that. And that's pretty much it for the passive tree. Like I said, for the last few points, mainly you just want to put it into Berserker. And then once you're done with Berserker, you can probably put a few more points into Shamanic Infusion for the penetration, because the more penetration, the better. Now for gearing, for idols, we want either physical damage, damage over time, or melee damage. There are melee damage idols. You want all 4 of them. Now on the prefixes, you can either get, I think, Totem Health or increased health, like your increased health. Either way, those work. For the idols, I'm actually supposed to be using 4 hybrid HP idols like this one, but I'm actually using my idols to cap my resistances right now because my gear is an absolute mess. So you can either use it for, resistances to help you cap out your reses, or you can use it for HP. Now, required uniques for the build. This isn't quote unquote required. I actually used an Apathy's Maw all the way up to the point where until I used a Leviathan Carver. So you can use either up until the point where you can run a Leviathan Carver, but I would not start this build without one, as it's the main reason to play the build is the Leviathan Carver, as this gives us a lot of damage with our Aftershocks. Now, the secondary unique is Atrophy. This is a normal drop from regular Rye or Empowered Rye either. The 25% penetration against all resistances for damage over time. That just gives us 25% flat pen for all of our damage over time sources, which is pretty much our Aftershocks. So, and that's actually one of the main reasons we're turning it into a damage over time is because we get the pen here. So if we left it as a hint, we actually don't get this pen. So these gloves are actually a very easy inclusion to increase your damage, which is really strong. And for a helmet, you can either use the other base that gives you mana regen. I went for the one with physical, as you want as much damage as possible. You want the increased melee damage, the plus to earthquake. If you have +2 to earthquake, you'd obviously grab 1 more point into shatterquake, or you grab 1 point in amplitude. Either way, both of them would work. It's really up to personal preference at that point. Then you'd obviously have increased health and endurance here, but I have resistance because obviously my gear is a mess and I wanted as much damage as possible because as you can tell, I'm tanky enough and I can face tank Oribus like it's nothing. So it's like, well, I want more damage. For the chest, we got the Vitality, the increased melee damage, because we want as much as that as possible. Increased melee damage, increased damage over time, or increased physical, all work for all of our stuff. So you can use all 3 of them. They all help our damage. Then, of course, health and health. This is your perfect chest, quote unquote. It's just the health didn't roll well because, obviously crafting in this game. Then the rings, you want mana regen, physical damage, mana regen, physical damage, and then use the suffixes to like cap out your resistances. The belt, the mana regen, the cleanse, and the health and health. This is your perfect belt. You just need better rolls than me. Of course, Afterfees. Then for the boots, I'm using it to help me cap my resistances because I was in the middle of farming Rye for void resistance, but I ended up getting leech rate instead. So leech rate actually feels really good for the build. So I could say maybe dumping the void res there, getting void res here on the spirit catcher, getting a better void res, and then putting void res on one of the rings. And then you could remove the void res here and you can run hybrid health instead. I would keep the poison resistance as that helps you tank a lot of the bigger Act 9 mobs like the Gorgons and stuff. So I would keep the poison resistance, probably put it on a different suffix here and then run HP as you want as much HP as possible. Then for this, you want the physical damage. The attunement does work for our damage because it gets scaled with attunement. So that does technically work. So it's like 32% more, 32% increased damage, but you'd probably want the increased physical or damage over time. Then res and mana regen. You want as much, you want like 22, like 24, 25 when stuff's up, kind of like that. That's like the sweet spot really, where you can kind of spam earthquake when you're like clearing. And then, of course, when you're on a boss, you can just use Tempest Strike, like I said. I 100% expect this. It's not an exploit. It's just clever use of game mechanics. They just forgot that this node exists. So I'm sure that they'll change this and reduce the numbers on this. But it should still be very effective in reducing the amount of whiffs you get with Tempest Strike. Now, that's pretty much it for the gearing, I believe. Oh, yeah, the amulet. Mana regen, physical damage. You could probably put poison res instead of that, but you want the frailty as well on hit so that you get the reduced damage from enemies. That's pretty much it for the gearing. It's pretty simple, pretty cheap to get together. You technically don't even need a Leviathan Carver. You can just run the 2-handed mace. I can show you what it looks like. There's a 2-handed mace you could use instead until you can get a Leviathan Carver. Yeah, it's called an Eberhead. So what you do is you run melee flat. I can actually show you right now. You would run melee flat, physical, because you want all of your damage to be physical so you get benefit from all the stuff from Druid, like the physical pen and of course the physical damage. Then you'd run increased damage over time as well. Either increased damage over time, you could run increased melee damage actually technically, or you could run physical damage, of course, percentage, and that would pretty much be your end game weapon all the way up until you can run a Leviathan Carver. Like I said, the main reason why you like the Leviathan Carver is the Fizz Pen, the increased damage, and the flat is all like, I think like 5 prefixes if you like round it all together. Now, you cannot avoid critical strikes. That means that you can't run critical strike avoidance gear on any of your stuff. Like you can, but it's worthless, right? Now, the way mobs work in this game, so they have a 200% critical strike multiplier, meaning whenever they hit you and crit you, they deal double damage. Now, there is a mod on suffix on rare weapons that gives you 50% less damage taken from critical strikes. Now, this is a little bit more inferior to that node because you end up taking like 30% extra damage from critical strikes. But since you're a druid, you don't really give a crap. You're so tanky anyways, and it doesn't really matter overall. But that is one of the weaknesses of Leviathan Carver that you have to take advantage of. Although, like I said, it opens up all of our suffixes for HP, everything else. So it's nice to be a one slot wonder, right? But yeah, with that being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and bye. I'll see you in the next one.